And
I've been
unmasked.
unmasked. This looks amazing. Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Billy Wright, welcome to Unmasked.
All right. What's going on, brother?
How you doing, man?
Yeah, good. Busy day.
Yeah.
I love it. I can't sit around and twiddle my thumbs, man. I love being busy.
Yeah, I know. You definitely seem like quite the busy man with everything. I don't know the first thing that goes into kind of like an alcohol brand or trying to. I'm sure there's a lot of different licensing, a lot of different processes. Like, it doesn't seem like it's an easy just go online, create a website, create an LLC, and then boom, you're a millionaire type of thing.
No, it's not. It's there's a plethora of different permits and licensing structures that you need to have incorporated, and every single state has their own licensing requirements through their Alcoholic Beverage Control Board. And so every state's different. Every state costs a different amount. Getting distribution in each state, sometimes you can, piggyback on distribution licensing. Sometimes you have to get it on your own. So yeah,
it can move this microphone a little bit closer.
It can be an absolute nightmare. Yeah.
Dang. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get into kind of the process and all that kind of stuff. But first, I want to know the person behind this brand. I want to get to know the person who created this espresso martini thing, because that's definitely not America on that map. So, but before we get into all that, to better understand you, I kind of want to get into your early life a little bit, kind of understand who Billy was and some of the major key points that have happened to turn you into the man I see here today.
Yeah, definitely. So, huge military background. So the old man was military. He was Navy, and he was in the Navy for my entire childhood. So, since birth, every 2 or 3 years, I was somewhere new kid at the block, new kid at school. I hated it. I cursed him for it. I cursed the military for it. I hated that. Imagine as a kid just leaving your friends behind, and you're always the new kid on the block. You're always the new kid at school trying to make new friends and figure that out. I hated it at the time. After I grew up and looked back on it, I think I loved what that forced me to do. Right? I'm a bit of a chameleon now almost, right? Where it's like I can fit in a lot of different environments because I was forced to as a kid, right? And I was usually moving from coast to coast. So there's a big difference between living in New York and living in California, right? And so, as a kid, you just kind of try to navigate those waters, and I did, which was great. But it was pretty hysterical for as much as I hated it. My entire childhood, I was kind of in a rock and a hard spot leaving high school. Kind of one of those situations where got permission from the judge to leave the state type of thing, and I ended up going in the military because I kind of didn't have any other option.
At what age?
18, right out of high school.
Okay.
Yep, graduated high school, spent a month just trying to, fail at everything I was doing, it felt like.
Yeah.
And I just said, forget it, join the military. And my intention at the time was I was going to join the military right at 18. I was going to do my 4 years, and I was going to start my life at 22 instead of 18, right? That was my intention. Mm-hmm. And now I'm fast forwarding a little bit, but that came and went real quick. And before I knew it, I was 22. My 4 years was up, and I was right where I started. I didn't plan for anything. I didn't set myself up. I was, I had a horrible plan on what was going to actually happen if I got out of the military. It was just move back home with mom and dad, live in their basement, and try to, find a way to afford to go to college or something, right? Just horrible. And so I stayed in the military. And then that ended up kind of blossoming into a 20-year career. So did a full 20 years in the military and retired. So that was, military was my entire first life, right? My first 40 years on this earth, I was affiliated with the military.
And what branch did you go into?
I went right into the Navy as well.
Oh, Navy. Okay.
I hate it. So there's no way I was joining the Army or Marine Corps because it was like I had this whole, I'm not running north against southbound bullets. Right. It's like, no, thank you. And because of, my childhood experience, I had no desire to join the Navy.
Right.
So Air Force, that seemed pretty cush, right? That was kind of like the easiest one, as your mindset of thinking of all the different branches. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, yep, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to join the Air Force. Went to join the Air Force, and because of the situation I was in as a little rebellious teenager, a little juvenile, I was not allowed in the Air Force. So I had to join the Navy if I wanted to continue down that path.
Right.
And I did, and I mean, it was amazing. I actually ended up going into aviation within the Navy, so kind of got to do what I wanted to do anyways, and it ended up working out in the long run, for sure.
Do you see some of the traits from the military that are still heavily influencing your life today?
Big time. I mean, I would say almost all of them, right? Like the whole concept of, you got to learn to be a follower before you can be a leader, that concept. So it was my military career. I joined as enlisted. So I enlisted into the Navy, and then I did 10 years as an enlisted sailor. And then I joined the dark side and went and became a commissioned officer. So kind of went from the lower working class totem pole to the executive level overnight concept. But with doing 10 years, in the ditches or whatever, it really helps once you're now in a leadership position to be able to lead the people, because you've been there, you've done that, you know what's going on.
Right.
And so all those traits that you get, I mean, not to mention the stuff they teach you, like you're getting courses, you're going through all sorts of training, more than just the life experience. And that has just helped me so much post-military for who I am, my discipline, just in all parts of my life, not just business or leadership or, friendship. It's nutrition, it's physical fitness, it's health, it's, everything. I feel like I am living a very balanced, disciplined life.
I'm almost envious of that, because as someone who's an entrepreneur myself, one of the biggest things that you do have to learn is that discipline structure. And I've had a few people on that come from like a military type of background, and the amount of discipline that you're forced to get into and that you're forced to learn. I didn't really grow up with a whole lot of discipline. It was more of me figuring out how to discipline myself, and it reflects now in my life today. And I see it like in other friends of mine. It was like, yeah, I get up naturally at 5 a.m. now just because I was forced to do it for years on end. First thing I do is I make my bed. The first thing I do is this. I take care of my body. I take care of this. It's almost a habit now. That's what these guys are telling me, and I'm like, it seems tedious, and it's not something that you want to do, but because you're in an environment that forces you to do it every single day of your life, there's no days off that like, oh, you just have to do it Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or it's a holiday today, so you don't have to do it. It's like,
yeah, it's 24/7.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's insane. Okay.
Yeah, I still wake up at like 6 a.m. just on the dot.
Yeah.
No matter if it's a big night or just, regardless of where I'm at, I'm pretty much just natural alarm clock about 6 a.m. every morning.
Which I'm sure that comes into handy quite a bit.
Absolutely, for sure. Yep. Very productive. It boasts for very productive days, right? Rather than sleep in the day away till noon or anything like that.
Right.
Even if you don't have anything going on, like just that mindset of staying productive, staying busy, staying disciplined, not letting yourself, slip in certain areas. So yeah, it's good.
That's where that whole like cheating mindset, where it's like, oh, I'll let myself off a cheat day. The only person you're damaging is yourself at that point, of having like, oh, it's weekend, so I don't have to wake up, or I get to sleep in those other days. It might feel okay in those days that you do get to sleep in, but there's science behind keeping a same habitual routine every single day, no matter what. And like I even reap the consequences today of not having those, where I'm like, oh man, I just slept in till like 9 a.m. I'm definitely not catching the worm today. That's for sure.
It's one of those things as well. I use a reference where, type of thing where it's like, oh, just have one. Yeah. Just do one. And it's like, yeah, but you know how many ones add up to, well, now you're just, living an undisciplined lifestyle, right? If I gave into every single just one, they would all add up into something more monumental, which is like, no, you can't let yourself slip on certain things. So
right.
Yeah.
Were there any specific events growing up that you see affect you majorly today?
I definitely grew up in kind of a Leave It to Beaver family environment, right? It was always, decent neighborhoods. The old man was military, so very disciplined, very old school. He went to work, earned the paycheck. Mom was the homemaker, took care of the kid. I'm an only child, so took care of me and washed the dishes and cooked dinner and all those things, kept the house in order. So it was that was very structured. From a very young age. I had high discipline enforced into my life. So knowing the right and wrong and knowing the repercussions from doing wrong things, right? So even some kids, if you can know right, everyone knows right versus wrong, but if you never have any repercussions for doing the wrong thing, you just keep getting away with it. So at a very young age and throughout my entire childhood, I lived a very, I wouldn't say sheltered, but definitely it was a dad ruled with an iron fist, right? Like he did not have just one. I mean, he was also very disciplined with his disciplining, his child that he was raising. So I'm so grateful for that because, I like to say I am who I am today because of everything that they aligned me to do, my parents, right? So I'm 42 today, and it's like maybe the past 24 years since I flew the coop is all on me. But, when I was up until 18, they morphed me into the person that I was at 18 to allow me to set me up to success in order for my adult life to be as successful as it is. So I owe a lot to them in just the entire way they raised me. And I mean, I can't imagine, the shit I put them through, just moving around. I was not, I was miserable, right? Every first year of the new place I would have to live, that was tough. You were missing your friends back home. You didn't have any friends yet. So it was like, I was very kind of, you did this to me, right? So it wasn't very nice to them, I'm sure. So yeah, I thank the stars every day for how they raised me, and that's who I am today, for sure.
I'm sure that also kind of shaped how you socialize and maybe adapting with certain crowds, not having that base camp of friends or something, or like, oh, me and these guys grew up all at the same time. Like I grew up in this is my hometown. Like you didn't have a hometown. You didn't have that kind of group that some people get to grow up with and stuff. It seems very isolating.
It can be, but going into the military friends and friendships are very different, period. I had the benefit of like living a kind of moving somewhere different and making new friends every 2 or 3 years lifestyle as a child. But going into the military, you're only around the people, your shipmates that you're around for a few years as well, right? So one, you don't have years, let alone a year, to figure out like who you want to have as your friend circle. It's like, no, you're in the military, heaven forbid you guys deploy together, go to war, and now you have that bond. You're instantly friends because you guys may only be friends for a year. Right. I might be showing up to a tour where that person's only got a year left, so now I'm only hanging out with them, and then someone else comes behind me, and now we only have a year to hang out together. So military friendships in general are shorter physically.
Yeah.
But what's so beautiful about it is because of how much we give within that year, knowing that, we're not just going to be living next door forever, raising our kids together, etc., that we give our all during the times that we do have each other physically. And it's one of those things where, because that bond is so drastic, that I've got friends in the military that I haven't seen in decades. And if I see them tomorrow, it's as if we were right back, 23 years old again. Wow. And just we're hanging out. We haven't skipped a beat. There's no awkwardness whatsoever. So yeah, it's definitely different in regards to how you socialize and how you make friends, right? Mm-hmm. Making friends as an adult is already a weird enough thing, right? Like, but it's just so much more passionate and forever, right?
It's incredible. I know plenty of people that, even with friends that they do get to see every day, every week, every month even, they still don't have that level of connection to each other. And that's
no way. Take it for granted.
Yeah, it could be due to a plethora of different things, but because, like you said, you guys are forced to have that mentality that, like, look, we might only have this 1 or 2 years to become friends, and you're still a human being. You still have to make relationships. You can't force yourself to be like, you know what? I'm just not going to make relationships. I'm not going to make connections. I'm not going to make friends. It's a human thing. We're social creatures, so we have to do that. But the ability to adapt to it almost, I feel like, kind of forces you to learn how to be comfortable with yourself and be comfortable not having those kind of social tendencies of just always relying on friends and stuff, which
Absolutely.
I know a lot of people have, including myself. I grew up with, I'm bored, I'm going to go hang out with a friend. I didn't have the ability to be like, you know what, I'm just going to enjoy some time to myself. I was always trying to find somebody to hang out with, or somebody, and not even just having a relation, like not even just like, I'm going to go hang out with somebody because we're best friends. It was because I wasn't comfortable in my own presence alone, which was its own whole plethora of issues going on.
Yeah, did you need the light?
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Yeah,
I kind of knew it was going to do that. I don't think it was really affecting a whole lot.
No, you're good. No, I mean, you absolutely nailed it, because I forget where I was going to go with that. We'll skip that, I guess.
No worries. But that's awesome. Like it's really cool to kind of get an insight into a life that is so different when you don't really realize of how different it really is. Like from an outside perspective, the military life is one thing. It's what you see in the movies. And when you talk to somebody, it's like, I mean, that could be part of it, but that's not at all how it actually looks. It's not going in and this happening and this happening. There's so many different layers to it.
Yeah, exactly. And so kind of going fast forward into the business, I kind of had hesitation on flying the veteran-owned flag, merely because, that stereotypical, what you see in the movies, right, and what you envision when you think of a veteran, right now, a lot of those companies that are heavily veteran-owned, right, like Black Rifle Coffee, all those awesome, American flag bandana, M16s, just headbanging in with the American flag in a thunderstorm, kind of bang bang shoot 'em up, oorah, bourbon and beer, kind of soldier. Right?
Yeah.
That wasn't my experience in the military. I was logistics. I was supply corps. So I was kind of, I was almost, on the business side of things on the military. So I didn't live that lifestyle growing up. I didn't live that lifestyle when I was in the military. So coming out, it was kind of like, I don't think I was the stereotypical, military person or veteran for that matter, right? So it kind of took me a while to even add it's not even on this one, the veteran-owned, kind of stamp of approval.
Yeah.
I've changed my packaging since then, but yeah, I that's one of the like constant themes was people never can believe that I was in the military, or when I was in the military, I wasn't in the military.
Yeah,
Like,
I couldn't guess it.
Like you are not the stereotypical type of guy. So I kind of prided myself on that while still trying to maintain like that's patriotism of like, this was, I did 20 years in the military. I mean, that's worth something. So yeah, it's different.
Yeah, no, I get what you're talking about. When you do see those kind of veterans because even just the other day, I saw this SUV that was in front of me completely decked out in so much military memorabilia. And I have, don't get me wrong, I completely respect the military. But, I don't know, as a veteran yourself, what goes through your head when you see people that are almost just advertising themselves as being from the military?
Well, I mean, I think just like with any sort of, group of individuals that are identifying themselves as, this thing, there's always the obnoxious end of things, right? So there's always the over the top, just look at me, I was military for 4 years or whatever, right? Doesn't take away from the fact that they served the country, etc. But yeah, it can be a bit obnoxious, and you kind of roll your eyes like, oh boy, here we go. But then you take it to the other the spectrum, and you've got your Vietnam vet, or even in my lifetime, the World War II vets that we were still kind of paying tribute to, and just seeing them and having they're always wearing at least some sort of military hat, a pin. It's definitely a license plate. Like no matter what, they are flying the I am a veteran flag. And I think it kind of starts to boil down to your involvement, right? Like, I don't fly the flag because, or, I'm not screaming from the rooftops that I was a veteran because, I wasn't in the shit. I wasn't kicking down doors and like in the fight. And that's the type of thing that really carries over to these veterans that are kind of that oorah, like kicking ass and taking names veterans, because that's the life they lived in the military, you know what I mean? And rightfully so. So they should own that shit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I dig it. I love it. It just wasn't what I experienced during my career. So, I'm not in that specific boys club within the overarching, boys
So
club.
we're kind of on a similar path then, because like when I do see those, for me, in my head, to have that much pride for something, you have to have a very generous amount of involvement in that kind of thing. It has to have such an effect on your life that you want other people to know about it. And it's not to say that like, oh, look at me, I did this. It's like, this person could be a war hero. We've seen movies about those war heroes and stuff. And if I was one of those war heroes, I would damn well want to have a license plate saying, hey, I got shot 3 times by this guy because I saved this whole town or something. Like, you don't know what's behind it, but it does kind of get me iffy with some of those other kind of, it's like, oh, I sat behind a desk for the entire time that I was in the military. I'm still doing it because I was a veteran. But for me, I'm like, well, like, I respect what you did, but your job wasn't far off from a regular desk job.
Exactly. That's
and like, I'm not discounting you or anything that you did or anything.
To be honest, it's kind of a bit of survivor's guilt, right? Which is kind of why I'm not as comfortable flying the veteran-owned flag,
right?
Because I was never in the shit, right? I worked a 9 to 5. It just so happened that I wore a uniform during it, you know what I mean? I did my deployments. I saw some action, but nothing to the point where, I feel like I earned those stripes. I didn't earn those stripes, you know what I mean? And that's the difference, which is why I'm always kind of hesitant to, do the check me out, I'm a veteran. It's like, yeah, well, yes.
And don't get me wrong, like, I'm going to put it out there, I have no problem with anyone who's from the military flying flags or boasting the fact that that is a tough job. That's not just you get an interview for something and then you start and then 2 weeks later you get a paycheck. It's boot camp that you have to go through, people screaming at you. Like, I've seen what those boot camps look like, and they're nasty. It is not somewhere you want to be for fun. And so I fully, like, if you want to fly that, if you want to show what you've been through, be my guest. It's just, when I see, like, just decked out, it's a different mentality with, like, I wonder what they did. I wonder if it is something that, like, how they earned it, and not to say they didn't earn it, but, like, I'm curious of how, like, what those trophies represent for them.
Right.
If it's something that's just a title saying that they were in the military, or if it's like, no, this is a trophy for me, or this is how I express being this, like you said, for you, 20 years of your life. That's not just like, oh, I spent 4 years there and was in and out. That's half of your life pretty much right there. So it's a big representation of who you are. So kind of getting away from that whole military background a little bit, where does the ambition to be an entrepreneur and businessman come from? Because it doesn't seem like your dad was very much like an entrepreneur, businessman.
Not at all.
Doesn't seem like your mom was that much either.
Nope. Extremely frugal, not taking any risks.
Where does it come from for you?
So it's a little cliche, but Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Oh, I've read it.
All right. It was probably the first self-financial help awareness book I ever read. And I read it probably when I was young 30s, maybe.
Okay.
And it was the first kind of opening the doors to, oh shit, like there's other things more than 9 to 5 out there, right? Like there's more than one ways to live a life rather than got to go to job, got to punch in, punch out, work till I'm 80, get my retirement, collect Social Security, die in a nursing home. So, it's kind of like, okay, there's like other things. And it was kind of funny from that moment on, I knew I had already kind of knew I was going to do 20 years in the military, But from that moment when I read that book, I knew the second I get out of the military, I will never work a 9 to 5 again. And what's crazy is that's kind of all I knew. Like, I knew for a fact that I would never have a boss. I would never work for someone, in the traditional form. I would never do that. I would be entrepreneurial. It would be investment. It would be real estate. Who knows, right? Whatever it was, I knew it wasn't going to be 9 to 5. And I mean, I even retired from the military and started life number 2 with only that bit of information. I had zero plan. I had zero kind of, this is how I'm going to make a living. We get our pension. We get our pension from the military. We got our VA disability that comes in. And, that I'm never going to be homeless. You know what I mean? Like, that covers life expenses. Right? Not an extravagant life, but I'm good.
Enough to live.
Right. I'm taken care of. So with that knowledge, it was like, well, now's the time to kind of risk it all. Now's the time to roll the dice when I have this incredible safety net of I could lose it all and I still got my monthly income without having to lift a finger. You know what I mean? So that was, but it's kind of funny looking back. I learned much since then. But yeah, Rich Dad Poor Dad was the like my eye-opening book that I read that was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Why am I working for someone else for whatever wage, And so that was the beginning of it all.
And especially that that quadrant. Was I, B, S, and I forgot what the fourth one was, but
self-employed investor.
Yeah.
And worker.
Worker. And yeah, that was actually one of the first books I read in my entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, that's good.
Though I might not agree with the entire book, he does make incredible points with that quadrant with you can be self-employed, which means that you own your own income, but you're still selling your time. And so there's a very specific quadrant that you want to aim into. And so I don't know. That's awesome. That's kind of like a big thing for you. So you said that you didn't really have a specific avenue at that point. What brought you into the alcohol industry then?
All right, so let's dive in.
Yeah.
So being military.
While we're diving in, let's crack open some of this stuff. So we got this espresso martini mix right here.
Yep. So we're pouring half in.
Okay. Let's see this. And for those who don't know, yes, I am over 21. I haven't gone into my personal stuff that much on here, so I don't know how many people know of how old I am. I'm not going to divulge. Screw it. I'm 24. So
24.
You said your age. I'll say mine.
So then just recap the lid and shake the remaining liquid right in the bottom, right? Because I bought a wrong poster. So that's the espresso martini we're looking for, right? With that nice crema foam head. Okay. Because you can't get that out of a canned cocktail, right?
Right.
So you pour, shake, pour. So once you got that crema kind of going right in the bottle, you just pour it right on top. And now you have that beautifully aesthetic espresso martini with the signature crema foam.
Oh, yours looks way better than mine.
Yeah, I've been doing it for a while. With my tasting events, I just having to do it 24/7.
But I don't make a lot of martinis when I bartend. Salute.
Cheers.
Oh, man. Oh, that is delicious.
Yeah, there we go. All right, now let's get into it.
Yes. Okay, perfect. All right.
Kitty hour is over. So, one of the tours that I did while I was active duty military was an officer exchange program with the Australian military. So I was living in Melbourne, Australia for 3 years, attached to an Australian Defence Force unit. So I was the only American, just like exchange programs with colleges. It was that way for work. And I'm not married. I've got no kids. I got no debt. I am a massive socialite. So I'm on the scene, right? And for some reason in Australia, specifically Melbourne and Sydney, espresso martinis, next level. It's such a following. It's a culture, an absolute religion. They have espresso martini festivals. They have it on tap at high-end spots. And everywhere you go, no matter what, it's such a respected cocktail that when you order an espresso martini, you get the espresso martini, the OG espresso martini. Come back to the States, right? You go to 10 different bars, you're going to order an espresso martini. you will get 10 extremely different cocktails, most of which will probably not even have espresso or any type of coffee in them, right? Okay. So during that 3 years when I was living in Melbourne, Australia, I thought it was the best place in the world, right? An absolute playground. So I knew once I retired from the military, that's my life number 2. I was going to move there for the rest of my life, citizenship, the whole nine. I retired late 2019, and that's what I did. I one-way ticketed my entire life back to Melbourne. And I was about probably 4, maybe 5 months into my immigration process, getting my permanent residency and getting everything sorted out there on the legal aspect. And that's when COVID hit. Yep. So, and I'm sure if you're familiar, Australia got the short end of that stick, specifically Victoria, which is the state that Melbourne is in. And so they shut the borders down. They shut immigration down. Lack of words, I got kicked out of the country, and I found myself back in the States. Actually, everything happens for a reason. It was a perfect opportunity. Mom's was dealing with some things, so I was able to go live with her, and I lived with her for the course of the entire pandemic, which we both kind of saved each other's lives, really, right? It was ended up being a pretty beautiful situation. And so once this was March, like late March of 2020, when that's like right when we were figuring out, oh, this shit's here to stay, right? Like we don't know what the hell's going on.
I remember that.
So, yep. So I was kind of going, okay, well, because what was funny was when I came back to the States, it was like, oh, I'll just pack a suitcase. I'll go back to America. This whole thing will die over in a month, and I'll be right back. Then I'll come back and I'll pick up where I left off on my immigration. And that was March, April of 2020. So I ended up realizing very quickly I'm not going back to Australia anytime soon. So instead of just sitting around waiting and doing nothing and waiting on immigration to open back up when the pandemic ends, if it would ever end at that stage, that was our view. So I was like, let me bring a slice of Australia to me. You know what I mean? Let me bring a slice of Australia and introduce it to the States. So because I'm on that level, I wanted it to be something in regards to socializing, social events, event management, partying, out, drinking, that scene.
Okay.
And in regards to that scene, Australia, I always just go espresso martini. So I'm like, let me create an espresso martini. And so no shit, like I said, no plan whatsoever.
Right.
20 years in the military, no entrepreneurial experience ever. Having to Google, how do I sell espresso martini? Like, just figure it out. And followed the bouncing ball, dotted the I's, crossed the T's, got the permits. Within 4 weeks, I had already created the LLC and got my permits, got a consultant, and then just started the entire process. And then during that process was when I was kind of like, all right, like Martini Mates, like that's why I created the company, and then had it very Australian influenced and Australian inspired, because it was kind of an ode to where I discovered my passion for espresso martinis and a love of where I actually call home.
Right.
So you had mentioned it earlier, where it was like, you don't have a hometown, you don't have a this, you don't have a that, and it's very true. It's kind of like, I'm kind of a nomad, for better terms. I've never lived anywhere longer than 3 or 4 years, in, my entire life. So I don't really have a hometown, and my parents live in different locations, and where they both live, I've never actually lived, so that's not going home. So for me, home is where the heart is, and my heart is in Melbourne, Australia, hands down.
Okay. So obviously in an espresso martini, it's espresso and vodka.
And coffee liqueur.
And coffee liqueur.
That's
okay.
it. That's all an espresso martini needs to be, or is.
So I used to be a barista as well. So
nice.
And the barista that I used to, or the place that I used to be a barista at, they would source their own coffee, they would grind it and everything. Is that a process that you have, or do you source your coffee out, outsource it?
Well, so every individual ingredient that goes into my espresso martini is sourced from a specific vendor that produces that item.
Okay.
Right. I'm not going to give away my formula.
Right. Yeah. No.
Right? But it's so we have a coffee vendor that supplies us with espresso and cold brew for our coffee liqueur portion of the product, and yeah, so it comes from them, and it's fantastic. It comes in like a concentrate extract form, just for easier shipping and
right.
easier freight. But yeah, it's we vetted that when we were going through our formulation process of which coffee, whether it's Arabica, Robust, and we toyed around with some different coffees, more interested in hitting the flavor profile that we wanted more than per se the quality. But I think it kind of, it can't have one without the other.
Right.
So yeah, we ended up settling on the espresso and the coffee that we got now. And it's working out.
Do you make your own vodka, or is that outsourced as well?
So Red Boot Distillery is my co-packing facility.
Okay.
They are kind of my one-stop shop for all production, freight, warehousing, etc. So all my different packaging items, labels, all that, each individual raw ingredients for the liquid, that's all procured through each respective vendor, sent to my co-packing facility for them to then batch, blend, bottle, and house. They're also a distillery, so I get my vodka directly from them.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you're in a plethora of different stores right now, right? Like you have a big distribution channel.
Yep.
What was the process like to gain an actual distribution channel? Because I've seen plenty of people that have tried starting alcohol brands, and for them, they're like, they get stuck on how do they get it into the customer's hands, other than like, partnering with bars or partnering with this or doing that. What was that process like for you?
Well, so shout out to Jason Kane and Liquid Opportunities. He's the CEO of Liquid Opportunities. Jason Kane used to be the creator of Mike's Hard Lemonade. He was the president of Mark Anthony Brands at one point, and he was my initial consultant when I was going through my baby steps of creating this company, because he was kind of the one teaching me the ways of the alcohol industry. Right?
Yeah.
So he also has a national sales force. So once we kind of got to a point where I was done with his consulting, we had production. I then hired his national sales force team, to go get Martini Mates distribution in as many states as I could. Mm-hmm. So I owe my launch to them and their efforts. And they just went out and they were just, kind of oozing the market, right? With just reaching out to every distributor in every state, going through their local networks of, what they had within their networking chain. And they got me a few states, and we just kept expanding and expanding. But it got to a point where, when you're a brand new brand and you have, no points on the board, you have no sales record for the most part, right? So you're just super unproven. Not many distributors want to take you on, because that's a massive risk for them, right? It could be a horrible brand, and now they bought all this product, and now they're stuck with...
Nobody wants it.
Exactly. So in order to get a distributor to take you on initially, you kind of have to offer a bit of incentives for them, right? Whether it's bonuses, whether it's, any type of incentivizing towards, if you get this many sales, or if you get me into this many stores, whatever it may be, you've got to offer that. And because of what I was having to offer, I was pretty much losing money, like the first half of the year that I was getting this. So I told my sales reps, hey, you got to stop getting me into new states with new distribution, because it ended up being uncontrolled expansion. So I had to dial that back, and then focus on the regions and the markets I was currently in, on getting more stores, more sales, marketing it better within those areas, rather than just trying to expand. So that was unfortunately the end of Liquid Opportunities relationships with Martini Mates, because I didn't need any further distribution. So I kind of took the reins back a bit, and ended up getting Arizona distribution on my own through Southern Glacier Wine and Spirits, which is one of the biggest distribution companies in America. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of, once you're in the door, that's step one.
Right.
You know what I mean? Getting distribution isn't the end goal. Getting distribution is just, okay, now we can actually operate, right?
This is part of the brand.
Yeah, and the alcohol industry hasn't changed since Prohibition. It's a 3-tier legal construct. So as a supplier, I can only legally sell to a distributor. Distributors can only legally sell to a retailer, so a bar, restaurant, liquor store, grocery store. Mm-hmm. They can then finally legally sell to consumer.
Gotcha.
So me selling, kind of bulk product to a distributor, that's the end of my revenue stream because they buy the product from me. That's that.
Right.
But then if they don't sell the product to a store or a bar or a restaurant, for then the bar and restaurant to sell to a consumer, my brand's going nowhere.
Right.
So getting distribution is barely just step one. And so once you have distribution, now the clock starts.
Right.
Now it's get out there, grind, find new accounts. You essentially have to turn into your own distributor sales rep, right? And do the quote unquote job of a distributor sales rep.
Right.
Because, it's really hard to incentivize these distributor sales reps compared to the Grey Gooses and the Budweisers of the world, right? Martini Mates isn't paying these distributors bills, right? It's the Patrons, it's the Casamigos, right? It's all those massive brands that are just dumping money in regards to incentive and marketing and bonus structures to their distributor. So that's when it's like, all right, now bring on the 18-hour days once you have distribution. And that's what I've been thriving for, and I'm loving it every second.
So at what point would you consider Martini Mates a success?
I already do.
Yeah?
I already consider it a success. The fact that I was even able to, with zero experience, zero knowledge. I mean, I remember there was a point in time when I was on a call with someone and they were like, send me your P&L. I was like, what's a P&L? Like that wet behind the ears, right? Like I know what a profit and loss is, but I'd never heard it, for the first 40 years of my life, I only spoke military acronyms, right? Like I didn't speak business language, right? It was an unknown, completely different language to me. So the fact that I was even just within a year and a half able to go from, not having anything to production.
Right.
I mean, I was already over the moon and gone through like a successful capital raising campaign. And then it was just like, the right people just kept entering my life at the right time. So like I said, Jason Kane and Liquid Opportunities came in for kind of the first year to year and a half, and they guided me beautifully. I got another consultancy firm when I got here into Arizona, and they were what helped me get into Southern Glacier. And so all these wins, right? Like granted, the whole concept is acquisition exit strategy, right? Like I built it to build it up, sell it, and go back to plan A, right? Get back to Australia. So that's the end state, right? But that doesn't mean I can't celebrate every little victory from like, oh, I finalized the graphics with my, graphic designer, and now the packaging's complete. Before we even have product, that's a win. That's a victory. That's success. So just at the fact that I've been able to start in an industry that is riddled with red tape and legal constraints and restrictions and stay afloat and compete with some of the key players and get to the point where I'm at now, I already consider that success.
That's incredible.
Hell yeah. I'm loving every second of it, man.
Well, to that, huge congratulations, Mr. Billy.
Cheers, brother. Thank you.
Awesome.